Welcome to Are You Down with LPT? I am Kyle Clarkson, and today here with Pete Jones and Richard Pierce. How you guys doing?
Fantastic.
Doing good.
Good. Yeah, great to have you guys. Talking to a couple new agents. Richard, you've been out a little longer than Pete has, so a couple steps ahead of him, but that's okay. And so maybe we'll just start kind of, I don't know who wants to start here, but tell us a little bit about how you got into real estate. What were you doing before real estate and what brings you here?
Ladies first.
Yeah.
I've been in marketing for the last 20 years. So I've been on the corporate side in different organizations, rising up through the ladders. Just got to a point where that wasn't as rewarding as it once was. Mm-hmm. And the average tenure of positions I was in was a year and a half, 2 years, and it was just like a rotating door. And I thought I'd try the agency world, which I did for 2 years, working for an agency out of Wisconsin. But that was fully remote work, working from home, 30-hour billable requirements a week. And I basically didn't see anybody of a human nature other than my family. And so it got to a point where I was really missing being involved in the community, really missing being involved with people and humans and networking and having that connection. And I wasn't helping anybody. I was helping my clients who obviously were, global construction companies or local mom and pops, but just wasn't helping anybody. So those are three things I really wanted to do and started looking into real estate. As a result of those three things, I felt like I could do all three of those really well. Asked my wife one day, hey, what do you think about real estate? And she says, actually, I was thinking about that for you myself a couple of days ago, but I didn't want to bring it up. She wanted me to stumble upon it myself and just started down the route. That was August of last year, and here we are. Yeah.
And so do you have a marketing degree?
No, ironically, I have business administration from William Penn, and then I got my graduate degree at Drake with the same business administration.
Yeah, so you got on the marketing side
I would have done marketing at Drake, but they didn't have enough people interested in that at the MBA period program, so I didn't get the opportunity. But
yeah, I think if I had to do it over again, I would get a marketing degree because I don't think there's anything that could help me more in real estate than learning the marketing side. So
yeah, I felt like that would be a step up for me to move into that world. And of course, there's a heck of a lot to learn on the real estate side of things. And I'm not a salesman by personality, so I'm learning those things as I go.
Yeah, and those are good skills to learn. But you talked about things you weren't experiencing in your last job and connecting with people and helping people, and that's a beautiful thing about real estate. We get to do that on a daily basis. So yeah,
for sure.
Richard, how about you? What were you doing in your previous life, and how'd you stumble into real estate?
So I've done retail management and restaurant management for years and years. I've worked in schools, and then most recently I worked 6 years at Valley Church, and just was looking for a change. And God kind of put this idea. We were driving home from Thanksgiving dinner. It was 1 a.m. driving home from Ankeny, and my wife's in the passenger seat, and I said, hey, I think I'm going to become a realtor. I think she'd squash it, and that would be the end of it. It came out of nowhere, and my wife said, oh, that's brilliant. Yes, do that.
Good to have supportive wives. You both have it, apparently.
Both sure. So that was kind of the impetus of it, and then having been in schools and having been in retail and having been at the church, as I got closer and got more into it and took the classes, my sphere of influence is ginormous. So the people that I talked to said, you'll do well because you know everybody, and everybody knows you, and that's been a blessing.
Yeah, so, and when did you start?
July of 24.
Yeah, 24, and you're off to a great start. So that definitely is true. So as a new agent, what are you guys finding as the biggest challenge right now?
Leads.
Yeah.
I've explored buying leads. I went to market, if you will, air quotes, in January, at the first Monday of January. Previous to that, I got my license December 9, so it was basically just getting my website spun up and doing all the things in December. In January, I went to market, and then so obviously I reached out to my sphere, sent a letter, did all the connections there. I'm networking. I'm going to community events. I'm doing all the things that they tell you to do, but the leads aren't there right now for new guy in February. So I've explored buying leads. I went to Zillow and looked that up, and I could for $500, I could buy some zip code of Des Moines I don't really know that well,
Yep.
and maybe get 4 or 5 leads out of it. And I decided not to do that right now, but that's really where I'm at. I'm like I mentioned earlier, getting ready to door knock my neighborhood.
Yeah.
I sent the letter out to my neighborhood. I want to be the realtor there.
Yep.
So leads, that's my struggle.
Yeah, and that's always for anybody in real
Yeah.
estate, but especially as a new agent, leads. And, so we'll talk about, hey, am I a networker, am I a prospector, am I a marketer, am I a converter? And that's where you come back like, okay, I go buy leads. I'm a converter, and so that's where my business got going. I started buying, spending a few $100 a month at 50313 in Des Moines, and that's really where I first started to realize, I'm a pretty good converter. I can do this. But you don't know those things a lot of times till you try. And so then you can start door knocking and you start doing that prospecting side. And as a new agent, you gotta figure out where you fit. But I think most agents realize that, hey, having a good sphere is important, but I need more than that because you don't know when those guys are going to move and when they're going to be ready to move. And so you want to continue to work that, build that. I think what you're doing in your neighborhood is going to be important. You want to be the mayor of your neighborhood. So there's probably some farming you can do along that as well. But, leads definitely is probably always the biggest obstacle, right? Yeah.
Sure.
I think that's a challenge, but also just building the habit, doing the right thing and developing what that is, because there's no real playbook.
Yep.
There's no, this is what we do in the first week, this is what we do in the second week. So really observing and asking questions and
Yep.
kind of developing those habits. So even when you're not doing stuff, you're doing stuff.
Yep.
I think that's the biggest thing I've learned in my short time is just kind of, if you don't have anything or anyone you're working with, don't say, okay, great, it's a Netflix day.
Yeah.
Putting in the work and finding ways to do that.
Yeah, and a lot of times you put in the work now and you see the results later from it. But I mean, sometimes people from the outside are looking at real estate agents like, yeah, it's pretty easy. You just go sell a house, make a big paycheck. And the reality is there's a lot of work to get to that point, which is something that, as you're in longer, it gets easier because the work that Pete's putting in with his SOI eventually starts paying dividends. But
Yeah, we actually, in Elevate yesterday, went over, Lisa and Connie mentioned the 184-point realtor, not checklist, but things that realtors do just to provide perspective. And Lisa says, I look at that every morning on my mirror in my office and remind myself, and like the daily affirmations. I'm like, I printed that off, and I printed one for Richard, and like I'm going to start doing. So.
Yeah. So you both have mentioned network, your SOI, and that's a huge part of anybody's real estate business. Like, what are some of the things you're doing to, one, start working and letting your SOI know you're in the business, but then also to grow that SOI? Any tips or things you guys have started doing?
One of the podcasts I listened to early was not asking people directly for whether they're moving, but asking them if they know somebody who's moving, which seems less intimidating.
Yeah.
And that has done well. So then that leads to just meeting people face to face. And then a 21-year-old agent named Jay has been instrumental in teaching me not to be desperate, but to just know what you're doing and sow the seeds. And it was funny that this little punk shared that with me, but he knows what he's doing, and he listened to my spiel and said, you sound desperate. But setting up a meeting and not having the urgency that I need you to buy something yesterday, but I'm here for you if it's a year from now, if it's 2 years from now. It really helps.
Pete mentioned this, but most people that get into real estate, we don't want to come across as a salesman. And yet this is a sales job. And so there are skills, and what you say matters. Tom Ferry has a great script, his whole playbook, and what you say matters. And so Jay is, he's been doing it 3 years now, and I remember listening to him early. And I'm like, ooh, it's something that's learned, and it's a skill that's developed, because we don't want to sound desperate. We don't want to sound like a salesperson. And so honing in on those skills is important and something that's developed over time. But the biggest part is that you're actually doing it. You're making the calls. Because that's the name of the game is, make your calls. Real estate's math. How many conversations am I going to have? How many appointments will that lead to? And then ultimately, that leading to contracts. So,
and I think starting out, having a sphere of influence, Pete, you have one as well, but letting people know you're an agent, letting them know you're a realtor.
Don't be a secret agent.
Because don't be a secret
Yep.
agent, exactly.
Yep.
Because you could say, oh, I put a post on Facebook so everybody knows, but
Yep.
nobody seems to know. So
Yep.
actually face-to-face going, hey, just so you know, here's my business card, and I'm here if you ever hear anything.
Yeah.
Helps a lot.
Jim drove that home to me. He told a story where he was new to the business, and he said everyone still thought of me as the news guy, the news guy. No one thought of me as a realtor. And one of his good friends listed their home, and Jim called him and said, "Hey, that's great. If you have any questions, I'm here." And the guy's like, "Oh crap, I forgot." He says, "Pete, you're not a marketer anymore
Yeah.
game right now, and just get out there and have that conversation." And that was supportive to me. So that's literally what I'm doing.
Yeah, top of mind awareness. How do we stay top of mind without being desperate? You know, it's just kind of those, little left jabs, right hook. What's the Gary V's book? But yeah, you let them know. So as a new agent, you probably view real estate one way, but when you're actually doing it, it's not maybe quite what you expected. What are maybe one or two things that you weren't quite expecting, when you became licensed?
Defer to you on that one. You've been in it longer.
So the first deal I did happened quickly and it went smoothly, which everybody in the office laughed at.
Yeah.
First of all, because it happened really quickly, but then that it went so smoothly. And since there have not been as many smooth ones, there's a lot of behind the scenes calls and details that, on paper it looks like, hey, you got a buyer, you got a sale, but there's a lot of work that you're doing, a lot of nights, a lot of this. My wife has been very patient with me. Again, supportive wife is very helpful.
Yep.
Because 8:30 at night, I'm getting a call from the other agent that we have to change the, a contract because of this or that.
Yeah.
Learning and just keep learning and keep asking.
And you can do it 20 years, and you're going to run into something like, oh, I haven't experienced that. Like I called Tracy, our broker, the other day because I'm like, I'm not exactly sure how I should handle this. I needed somebody to bounce it off. That's 22 years selling real estate, and so it's kind of always evolving and changing. So
what you just said, though, what's been very healthy is that you can bounce stuff off anybody in the office. It's been so amazing to have this as a resource versus it being competitive and people not wanting to share. Everybody's willing to share. I was in here one night and all my normal people that I go to weren't here, and there was somebody else here, Julie Larson.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, do you have a minute? And she looked crazy busy, and she goes, I have a minute.
Yeah.
Literally, I have a minute. And then 20 minutes later, I walked out of her office with the answer I needed, and I felt good, and I felt like I had another resource now. So don't be afraid to ask.
I love that, and I think there's a couple things to take away from that. One, we want an abundance mentality. There is plenty to go around, and so to have that, okay, Richard, Pete, we want everybody to have success, and there's plenty to go around to do it. And two, we've got a great company and team of people that want to see each other, succeed. You mentioned Jim earlier, but Jim is a perfect example of that. With you guys and Jay, and how can he feed into newer agents and help them learn and succeed. So I think he's been awesome at that. Pete, anything that maybe wasn't quite what you were expecting as you got into real estate?
I think back to a conversation Richard and I had several weeks ago where it came from a situation that we were talking about, but we both said, and I don't remember who said it first, probably you, because you're the smart one. Said,
Not true.
just think about what kind of agent you want to be, right? How do you want others to perceive you from a client perspective, from another agent perspective, just in the market, and let that carry you on your decision making. And that, like I said, it came from a situation, but it was refreshing to think through that. At the end of the day, it's my reputation that goes as far as it can, and I need to make sure that I continue to act that way and make decisions that way. And I don't know that answers your question necessarily, but
No,
that's where I went to from that is
Yep.
so remember what kind of agent you want to be and how you want to be perceived.
Yeah.
And the more experiences you have, you will work with agents who, hopefully this isn't who they are, but it is more of a challenge and less honorable, I guess is the word, cutthroat. And this office has not been that, which has been really healthy. And then you can find situations where you're working with great agents. Some of the agents I've close deals with, I'm texting them constantly like, hey, I really appreciate you, and this is great, been working with you. And they seem like, why are you sending that? And I'm like, trust me, they're not all like you. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's shift a little bit, but if you think of someone who's thinking about getting their real estate agent or real estate license, or just got their real estate license, what's one piece of advice you might give them as they're getting kicked off in real estate? And Pete, obviously it's still fresh for you, but
yeah, I think
couple months in.
I don't remember where I heard this or how many times I heard this, but having 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 months worth of savings in place when you get into the market.
Richard's laughing.
Yeah. That's
good advice.
That's necessary because you get into month 2 like I am, and the leads aren't flowing in yet. You're thinking, okay, even if I close something today, it's going to be 6 weeks, and you start looking out, and that the anxiety is real. And I've never really been an anxious person before, but somehow real estate did that for me. So certainly, if you're looking to get into it, make sure you're financially prepared.
Yeah, be prepared, and even not to discourage you here, but year one is, I was having this conversation with Jay, and I look at Jay, and he might have sold 1 or 2 houses year one, and then sold, last year, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5, and now this is year 3, and he's put 4 or 5 under contract this year. And there's a natural progression that happens. Now you can, hurry that along by doing some things to generate leads, but there's a natural progression. Year 1 to year 2 to year 3 is really the year where we see people kind of take off in real estate. So there's some learning, and you got to be prepared financially for it. And not to discourage you or anybody else, but it's just, there's a natural progression that happens in people's business, and we see it all the time with people. Doesn't mean Richard had great first 7 or 8 months, but still there's probably a lot more growth that can happen, right? As you look ahead to year 2 and 3. So
yeah, and I was asked a lot from people, are you going all in, or are you doing this part-time? And everyone has said, really, to move the needle more quickly, you really need to do it full-time. And I 100% agree. I think it would be much harder to mature working a part-time job in the morning and doing this in the afternoon, or vice versa. You kind of have to be all in.
And when I see, through your marketing and social media and stuff, like you're putting the work in there. We talked about top of mind a minute ago and letting people know. And it's that consistent messaging that happens, and that's going to continue, as you continue down that road. So, Richard, any piece of advice for new agent getting going?
I would say really latch on to a mentor and find somebody. There's so many different personalities and so many different types of realtors in this office and in Ankeny that you can find somebody who fits your needs and does what, or have a couple mentors, but really somebody to bounce ideas off of. And then go into it realistically, kind of like what Pete said. Before I made the plunge and said I'm doing this all in, Jim, who's definitely been a mentor, was like, hey, just so you know, the first 8.5 months that I did this, I made nothing.
That's encouraging.
Yeah, right.
Pete?
But it helps be realistic because, again, what you said earlier, like, you think, okay, I'm going to become a millionaire. This is easy. And it's not. The reality is it's not. You have to put a lot of work in. You have to put a lot of grunt work in. You have to go potentially even door to door. Yeah. He was just talking about doing it. Having somebody to sound, and then just be in the office. I think you can be at home and do most of the stuff you can do, but the conversations David and I have had, Pete and I, Jim and I, Ted and I, there's so many conversations that happen just in here that you hear something, that you pick something up. And then on the LPT Connect, on the knowledge base, Penny Donald does a lot of classes, and one of them that's really stuck to me, learn one thing every day. If you learn one thing every day, then that's a good day. And so that's really stuck with me. So just try to pick up some new skill or new something.
You jump on a lot of those trainings then?
I do. I love those trainings.
Oh, good.
I love those trainings, yes. And some of them are really dry, and I have to fight to get that one thing.
Yep.
But I usually get one thing, and some of them I get 10 things I wrote a page of notes on. But there's some really good ones on there.
Yeah. I think being present is so important as a new agent. It's probably important for any agent, but especially as a new agent, because sometimes one, there's learning, but there can even be leads that pop out of there like, hey, I'm too busy. And so we've seen that happen. So I think there's a lot to gain just being around the office.
I'm here for you if you haven't
Yeah, okay.
too many leads. Yeah.
So you think about that new agent, somebody joining, a quality or a skill that you think would be important. If I'm going to be successful in real estate, what's one quality or one skill? And there could be several, obviously, but if there's one you guys could think of, what do you think that would be?
I think you have to like people, right? I mean, I think there's introverts who could do this, but like I said, I'm only 2 months in, but the big thing you need to do is to connect. It's a full contact business. I've heard that somewhere. And it's a relationship business. And so if you don't like having relations with people, or obviously that sounded weird. If you don't like people, that's going to be a hard challenge for you. And you still could be successful, but I think that'd be more challenging.
Yeah, for sure.
I think one of the transitions from the church was that, I'm listening to people and trying to help and walk beside people. And this is a natural progression. It's the same business, but not to say it this way, but to have a tough skin, because rejection is a huge part of it. So not to take somebody hanging up on you personally, not to take somebody saying no personally, and just bounce back. And Jay, again, is another one who is like, hey, we've met in the hallway here, and I'll say, I just got hung up on. And he's like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I just crossed their name off. He's like, no, call them in a month. It's like, give him 30 days.
I remember listening to Jay. I was in my office and he was out kind of in the other room, and he was having a conversation. The guy was yelling at him, whatever, cussing at him, hangs up the phone. He's like, all right, I'll give him a call next week.
Exactly. But that's helpful. And again, I'm not 21 anymore.
Yeah.
So hearing Jay and then saying, okay, Jay's helped me a lot. Somebody else who knew in the office was like, that guy? And I'm like, yes, him. He has a lot to share.
Yeah.
So you never know where you're going to find that nugget of wisdom.
Yep. Yep, for sure. Okay, so you guys think about your future business here, and we go out a couple years. Do you have dreams of what you want your business to look like in a couple of years? Is there an area of real estate you might want to specialize in? So Jay's calling for sale by owners and expireds, and we talked about online leads. But if you envision your business 2 years from now, what do you think that would look like?
Well, successful.
Yep.
There's that, which is the obvious. I think 2 years out, I have a goal and where I want to be, and I think obviously with that would be, help financially successful from that perspective, independent. I think by nature I lean more towards sort of the teaching mentality, and so at some point I see myself either being a team lead or being involved in a mentorship, or of course I need to learn the things first, but being in a teaching role and helping others who are new to the business mature and be successful as well, because to me that's rewarding. So I certainly think that's in my future.
Yeah, we got class on teams coming up, So
I heard.
Yeah. Just swing by.
For me, definitely being a team lead at some point, being able to mentor new people and really help them and share and listen. And then also just from what I've heard from like a Lisa Vance and like a Jim is just having people that I've worked with still involved with me, whether it's their relatives or they're moving again or just that I just keep in touch for no reason at all, just because I want to, because that's who I want to be, and hopefully that's who I am. But just having that huge network of people that there's a positive vibe. Oh, Richard Pierce Realty.
Yep.
Hey, those guys are good. It says it on his car.
If the car says it, it
The
must be
car
true.
sticker never lies.
You got to watch your driving now, though.
Yeah.
Jim said, I will never do that right off the bat. And I said, why? And he's like, because then I can't drive like a maniac.
Yeah, that's it.
Not that Jim drives like a maniac.
No, he wouldn't.
There's a car on the
may or
side of
may
the
not be
road.
true.
Car on the side of the road of the interstate today coming in, and it had a logo on the side. And I was like, see, that's why I don't want to do that. I don't want to be the car on the side of the road that everyone sees. I'm like, that guy can't drive in the snow.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about the car sticker, though. So I was at the Valley Community Center in West Des Moines and suddenly realized somebody's staring at me, and it's the woman in the next car, and then she's signals for me to roll down my window, and she's like, "Hey, you're a realtor? I didn't know that. I'm going to use you in the future."
It works.
I said, "Okay, the car paid for itself."
Yeah, that's right. That's right. A couple questions to end here. First one would be anything you've learned about yourself since you have started in real estate. Maybe you discovered something new about yourself or anything along those lines.
To me, it's interesting. I feel like I have a good sphere of good relationships with people. But when I have been thinking about picking up the phone and calling them, like that wasn't the relationship we had before. It was we're on Facebook and I'll comment here or there, but me calling them out of the blue, we haven't been that close. And so to me, it's an extension, and I'm not comfortable. I'm getting more comfortable. I was watching a Tom Ferry podcast as we're talking about podcasts. And one of the things he suggested was your prospecting time on your calendar, change the name from prospecting to something more important. So now mine says, my kid's future is more important than my fear of picking up the phone. Yeah. But so there's the people that I'm calling, like, I know what's going on in their family just through their social posts, but I'm calling them out of the blue and saying, let's get coffee, was for me a little bit of a hill to climb. But I'm certainly walking down that road and doing it, and it's just, and the first thing a lot of them say is, I'm not moving anytime soon. That's great, but I just wanted to talk through, learn more about what's going on in your world. And I think of the stat, I don't remember where I saw it, but the average person knows 6 people in this calendar year that will move, that will either buy or sell. So from that perspective, it's, like you said, a numbers game. Yep. Just getting out there and having conversations and reminding them that I'm in real estate now and talking through why I made the choice and what motivates me. And it's having a full heart and doing the things I want to do from a passion perspective, and just that. Having that conversation is not proof valuable yet, but it will.
Yeah, definitely. I go back to what Richard said earlier, like instead of asking them, hey, are you ready to move? It's, hey, you know anybody else?
Yeah.
That a little less invasive. But that also is difficult on the first call. Like, hey, we haven't talked on the phone here for 5 years, but you know anybody that's going to move? And so there's a balance to that, working on those relationships, letting them know you're in the business, and when the time's right.
Well, and I think it might have been Richard, or maybe it came from Jay. I don't know how, but it was just that conversation's shouldn't even be about homes or real estate. It should be, hey, how are you?
Yep.
Like just be a person, be a human.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
I think what I've learned about myself is I thrive in structure, which is really tough. So I have to create structure here and create routines. So that's been challenging, but it's also been rewarding to do that. But you can go days without doing anything because you don't have to, or you don't have anything. So you need to create that. And then the other piece is it has started off really, I guess, uncharacteristically well for me. And the piece of people in the office, some of the newer people are hearing like, oh, you're the golden child. The humility piece, like not saying, like letting that feed my ego, but to kind of say, this is, God's kind of helping me out and guiding me and providing all this stuff, and other people are really being awesome and kind of really not getting a big head.
Well, when you talk about being the golden child, and that's how we all refer to you as, so.
Thank you.
That's what I heard.
And so, you said some key pieces there. Structure. It's easy in real estate. Like, nobody's holding you accountable for the most part.
Right.
So structure, mentorship, doing hard conversations, making calls that you probably don't want to make. Like, these are things that are putting in place that are helping you have success. It's not just showing up and because I'm a golden child, people are calling me. Like, you're doing things, do the activity, and you'll see results. And it might not be tomorrow, but as time progresses, you'll see it. So I appreciate that, and good insights from both of you. Last question here I want to leave you with. If you could sell any piece of property in the world, what would that piece of property be? Home, place, whatever.
Great question.
Yeah.
Wow.
We're going deep.
Deep thoughts. I can't think of a specific property, but it would probably have to be some mansion on a beach somewhere.
Yeah.
I think that's
because you want to live on the beach.
I would love to sell somebody that property
because it's going to be a high number, right?
And then be known as the person that sells those kind of properties on the beach, and then I can move there. Yeah. And I was joking with Jim via chat. He didn't want to come back. I said, well, you could sell homes there. You could move into the warm environment. So anyway, that's where my head goes.
Yeah, I tried to sell Hilton Coliseum earlier this year with Taman Lipsey, so that
I
was
saw
that
that.
was my dream property. But yeah,
I think our dream places to retire are London or Australia or New Zealand. So if I could get into those markets and start selling things, that would be a dream for
international golden child.
Yeah.
I think that.
game on. Look out, world! Here I come.
Oh, well, that's great. Well, I appreciate you guys both. I think there's a lot to gain from listening to your guys' insights, and excited to have you join me today. So appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having us.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.